If you think you've already heard the most messed up fairy tales ever, no you haven't. Not unless you've read the 1550 Italian fairy tale by Straparola called Doralice and Tebaldo. It's a common misconception that German fairy tales are the darkest or most upsetting. That's really just true all over. Content warning for everything, literally everything. This story is what starts off a folktale type called unnatural love, and it all has to do with king fathers who want to marry their daughters and the daughters trying to escape. I touched on this briefly in a video about Allerleirauh, or All Kinds of Fur by the Brothers Grimm. It's in my video about the Maiden Without Hands, because there's lots of stories where women cut off their body parts to avoid being victimized, but it didn't go really deep into the worst versions of this, so today that's why we're talking about Doralice, the Bear, which is another Italian one, came a little later by Giambattista Basile, and Donkeyskin in France, which is the closest to All Kinds of Fur. All these stories start with a beautiful king who's got a beautiful daughter and a beautiful wife, and the wife dies. Maybe because we always tend to make things the woman's fault, it always starts with the dying wife saying, "You can't marry anyone except some stipulation." In a lot of them, she says something like, "You can't marry anyone who is less beautiful than me." But in Doralice and Tebaldo, Tebaldo is the dad, Doralice is the daughter, mom says, "You can only marry someone whose finger fits in my special ring." And so after she dies, he looks around, and can't find any woman in the whole kingdom whose finger fits the ring. And then one day his daughter, who's now a teenager, puts it on, and she's like, "Look, this fits." And he's like, "Oh." The story, thankfully, from the get-go says Tebaldo is a bad guy, calls him a wicked man, an evil man, and he's about to get worse. She goes to her old nurse for help, but they know that if the dad catches them trying to escape, he's probably going to kill her in a dilemma that's kind of all too real. So the nurse is like, "Okay, we've got this old chest of your mother's where she used to keep all her jewels and dresses. I've got this cool liquor that if you drink it, you'll basically hibernate. You won't need to eat or drink for a long time and you'll be asleep. We're just gonna hide you in this chest until maybe he gets this idea out of his head or God sends you better fortune." So she's just hiding and unconscious in this chest in the palace, and Tebaldo is in a rage. He's like, "As soon as I find her, I'm gonna kill her." So they were right to be afraid of that. He keeps seeing the chest, not knowing she's in there, and one day he decides the chest has too many terrible memories of his dead wife, so he's like, "Send the chest away." He sends the chest to the marketplace. It gets bought by a dude who's gonna take it to England, and the nurse watches all of this happen. Doralice is just unconscious in the box, and the nurse is like, "I'm sad to see Doralice go, but this is honestly probably better for her." A king buys the chest, takes the chest to his room, and every day while he goes out to hunt, she gets out of the chest and tidies up his room. She sweeps and perfumes it with incense and makes the bed, and then goes back, and he's like, "Who is doing this?" So one day he spies, he sees a beautiful girl get out and doing all this stuff, and he's like, "Ha, I caught you. What are you doing, beautiful girl, in this chest I bought?" And she does not tell him about her past because she is scared and ashamed, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're so pretty. I'm gonna marry you." And they have 2 children together. You'd think this would be happily ever after, but it's not over. Tebaldo has somehow figured out that she must have been in that chest that he sold, and so he's searching the world for her. He finds out where the chest got sold, and so he goes to England. Once he realizes Doralice is the queen, his plan is just wacky. He dresses as a servant and he sells the most amazing spindles. She hears that they're amazing, so she's like, "Bring that merchant to court," and she does not recognize him. She's like, "These are the most beautiful spindles ever. What do you want for them?" And he's like, "I want to spend one night in your children's bedroom." Not upsetting or weird, but the story says because of her innocent and simple nature, she grants his request. So during the night when everyone's asleep, he goes to Doralice. Apparently she keeps a knife on her person in her girdle. He steals her knife, stabs both of her children in their crib and kills them, and puts the knife back. But she and her husband find the dead children, they mourn, the whole country is looking for the murderer, and now Tebaldo pretends to be an astrologer. He's like a master of disguise, and he comes in, he's like, "I can solve the murder." Gets them to search Doralice, they find the bloody knife that apparently she hadn't noticed, and they think she killed the kids. The king is so full of rage that he's like, "I don't want to just sentence her to death. We're going to bury her in the ground up to her neck and leave her there and let the worms slowly devour her body until she dies." Tebaldo's glad that she gets sentenced to death for this murder, and he goes home. Apparently that's all he wanted, was to elaborately frame her for murder. And so he tells her old nurse when he gets home, "Haha, guess what I did to Doralice?" Not smart. Thank God for the nurse. She journeys to England, goes and tells the king, all of the truth, everything that happened. They dig Doralice out and nurse her back to health. The worms have not destroyed her completely yet. They go to war against Tebaldo, capture him, they put him on the rack until he finally confesses. They torture him again with red-hot pincers, draw and quarter him, and then feed his carcass to dogs, which he honestly totally deserves. The she-bear, which came out just slightly later, also Italian, starts similarly. The wife dies, the dad has made a promise he won't marry anyone as beautiful as his wife, and then he realizes the only one as beautiful of his wife is his daughter. And again, she goes to her nurse to try and escape this fate. So the nurse gives her a chip of wood, which as long as she holds it in her mouth will change her into a bear. This gives whole new meaning to the whole choose the bear thing. This one, he actually has a marriage feast and presumably marries her and then gets into bed and is like, bring me my bride to fulfill my desire. And when she comes into his bedroom, she puts the wood in her mouth, changes into a bear, and he rolls up in his bedding afraid, and she runs away. So she lives in the woods until a prince comes along and can't believe how tame this bear is, so takes her home with him to live in the gardens like a puppy. But later he's like, I wonder if this bear would like be my new cook, and asks the bear to cook for him, and she does. Like the previous story, she serves him, she takes care of him, all that. And his mom is also involved in this, like the mom loves the bear, and one day he suddenly is like, Mom, if this bear does not kiss me, I'm gonna die. Please get the bear to kiss me. She says, kiss him, oh kiss him, my beautiful bear. Do not let my poor son die in despair. The bear obediently neared the prince, who took her cheeks between his fingers and could not stop kissing her on the lips. While thus engaged, the bit of wood fell from her mouth and she turns into a pretty girl. I really do kind of wonder if the prince was disappointed. He marries her and they live happily ever after. So Donkeyskin is the French version that came out about 100 or so years later, and the same thing happens. Wife dies, king wants to marry his daughter. Really fun fact is the king has this donkey that poops gold. Every morning, instead of dung, it dropped a great load of gold coins. When the king tells his daughter he wants to marry her, she tries all of these ways to get out of it by saying she needs a dress that is as bright as the sun, as, you know, luminous as the moon, as bright as the stars, thinking he can't get her these things, but he does. So finally she's like, I want you to kill your gold pooping donkey and give me that skin to wear, thinking he'll never do that. But he does. Now this is written by Charles Perrault, who wrote the most famous version of Cinderella, the one with the pumpkin and the fairy godmother and the glass slipper. So she has a fairy godmother in this one too, called her Lilac Godmother. She's the one who gave her all the advice about the dresses and the donkey skin. So when that doesn't work, she's like, run away wearing the donkey skin. Gets a job working for another king. It's very Cinderella. She works as a kitchen maid, but on balls and feasts and stuff, she puts on the beautiful dresses that she took with her, and the prince starts to fall in love with her like, who is that? One day he's just walking down the hall and he looks in the keyhole of her room, not creepy, and sees her take off the donkey skin and be beautiful. So now he says, I'm so sick with love, I'm gonna die. And he goes to his chambers and he's like, Donkeyskin has to bake me a cake or I'm gonna die. So she bakes him a cake, but when she makes it, the gold ring that shows that she's a princess that she also brought with her falls into it. And so she brings him the cake and he eats it and he finds the gold ring and he's like, haha. They put the ring on her just like the glass slipper and they're like, oh, you're really a princess. Fairy godmother shows up, tells them the whole story, and then he marries her. Like I said, if you are familiar with the Grimm, Alalairow, or All Kinds of Fur, it's the exact same story as Donkeyskin, except instead of the skin of a magic gold pooping donkey, it's fur from every animal on earth. Except only in Donkeyskin does she get reunited with her dad, who has seen the error of his ways and married a beautiful widow. He begs for forgiveness and she gives it to him. Personally, I'd rather see him drawn and quartered and fed to dogs. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed some of the most horrifying fairy tales I've ever read. I still love them. I love the resilience of these girls. I love the older women helping the younger women navigate this horrible world in which men have all the power and the men are terrible and they have very few choices. I kind of love that fairy tales don't shy away from like actual real horrible things and have this message that no matter what the point of view of the writer, that you can escape it and you don't have to be stained by the shame of it forever. You can wear the donkey skin, you can be the bear, you can hide yourself in a trunk for months and months and like you're okay. You're still valuable, you're still good. All of these videos are now on my YouTube channel, which is this. In case something happens to TikTok, they're there if you want to follow me there. Also follow me on Instagram here. Check out my podcast, Folk Tales and Fairy Lore, and of course my book, Dust Spells, which is a reimagining of the 12 Dancing Princesses by the Brothers Grimm, filled with as much female resilience as these stories, but less horrifying.